Okay, so today's talk is on COVID-19. Has it changed who we are? It's based on some research of over 4,000 people. This is a public open webinar, so I can see some of the people on the call here I've spoken to before, and you know me and you know Lumina, but many people on the call here today are new to myself and Lumina, so I will be orientating you a little bit to what Lumina and myself are all about. So here I am, and this is my splash, a mark of my personality. More on this as we go through, because this was used to measure who people are in this research and contrast that with their different approaches to the COVID-19 crisis. Now, please let me indulge you in maximum of 5 minutes just to explain a little bit about Luminal Learning before going into the research. So Luminal Learning, we see ourselves as unconventional inventors of digital tools, going for smart data. So we've gathered a lot of smart data in this research, but simple language, we're condensing it to colorful and easy to understand concepts. And we're challenging the status quo of traditional outdated stuff, making it more engaging so that we measure people as they truly are. And we want to excite curiosity in individuals so they explore their behavior across all of selection and development. And we've been doing this for a decade. The focus going forward is now on how we deliver this digitally in formats that bring it to life for people. And our mission, we want to transform organizations, and we want to do this by helping them celebrate their people, one human being at a time. You can see a splash here on the right, indicating all the different ways of being are valued. We want people to be curious to explore all these different marks of personality and help organizations seek out their superheroes and develop them once they're on board. And we want to do this by exploring who we are and valuing different ways of being. So you're going to see in this research, we measured extroversion constructively and positively, and we did the same with introversion. We didn't overvalue one more than the other. And we valued being confident and resilient in a crisis, but we also valued being vigilant and cautious and looking out for risks. So we're balancing many things in what we do here, and we want to empower people to empower their own individuality so they see themselves beyond a type or a box or a label. And again, we're transforming organizations by celebrating their people. So there's three things that I think makes us different. The first is smart data, simple language, depth and richness in data, but conveyed simply and colorfully. Secondly, we value different ways of being. There's no one best way to be, and we've gone great lengths to remove any bias in our research. And thirdly, we are effortlessly virtual, meaning everything's scalable and it works across the globe, no matter how many people want to work with the resources. And here we are across the globe with different practices everywhere. We've got portraits that are digital and animate. We've got social learning, which allows you to do modules and really cool e-learning with gamification. We've got a splash app. We've got something called Spark Coach that animates and shows your personality with moving bars. And all of our courses are now completely available virtually across the globe. This is just an example of a digital animation of a team. You can see the team is now going to move between how it behaves every day. It's a disciplined team every day. Each dot's a person. But when we look at how they are underneath, they're more outcome focused and to the point. And then we look at where they go under pressure, and we can see under pressure they become more extroverted, just to give you a feel for what that can do for us. So that's probably enough of me talking about Lumina, just to give you a feel for it. Now I'm going to go straight into the research. So over 4,000 people, 4,414 have helped with this research, and it's by myself, Joanna Suter, and Tatiana Rosen. We've got organizations across the globe, so this is truly international research, to put it out to their staff to see who would like to support the research, including many sectors, banking, manufacturing, and it's largely this research focused on white collar workers. So it's leaders, managers, supervisors, people in a professional capacity. So a large part of this research is on that population. So please bear that in mind when we go through the results. We have not in this research targeted more blue collar roles or retired people and so on. It's working people more in the white collar environment. And we've got them to complete, and I know many of you on the call here today did complete the research, so you'll know it looked at how you respond emotionally to this crisis, physically, your level of risk taking. We looked at how you work remotely or not, your connection with colleagues, your use of technology, and we had a number of psychological measures, including your personality and how you respond to pressure, a scale on positivity, emotional intelligence, as well as looking at how adaptable and resilient you are in the workplace. And finally, we included a measure of your risk of a mental health issue to try and track and look at the impact on mental health. So that's what was measured, and thank you if you already filled it in. If you didn't fill it in, you're welcome to do so at the end of this session. The research is still open. We're gathering more. It is worth saying that this research is what's called a convenient sample. That means we went to companies that wanted to help us and government bodies, and people filled it in with informed consent. So there can be some biases in you who chooses to support research of this nature, and it's still ongoing, and we incentivize people to do it as well. Going into the data, just to give you a feel, 71% of the 4,400 were employed and another 9% self-employed. So 80% of this data is people in employment. Some of them became laid off or made redundant during the course of the research through this crisis. And there's not so many retired people and so on in this sample. And it's also a highly educated sample. 82% have a degree, thus supporting the view that this is largely a white collar research survey. And this is where the data came from. You can see at the top, 13% in US, Canada, Mexico, 18% the UK, quite a bulk in Europe, 20%, India and Middle East, 13%, China, including Hong Kong, Taiwan, 21%, the Southern Hemisphere, slightly less represented. We're still gathering data there, 4% Australia, 8% Africa, and 3% in largely in Brazil. So has it changed who we are? Well, actually, what definitely has changed in the last 8 months is the environment and the context in which we live. There's a lot more remote working, and there's a lot more risk of disease. People are responding quite differently. Our thinking's changed. We're not as optimistic as we were. That's a fact across the globe. Our feelings have changed. We're more anxious than we were 8 months ago, and that's across the globe. This is consistent. Our everyday behavior has changed. We're behaving in more cautious, risk-averse ways than we were before, which could include, if you believe in wearing a mask, wearing a mask. And our response to stress has changed. We're being triggered more by different sources of things that could stress us. So I'm going to give you evidence that there has been a change. Is it a permanent change, or will we flip back? There's 2 vaccines coming. It may be that some of these things are reversed. When the vaccine comes, we'll have to see how permanent this is. Now, if I was to summarize for you the 4 key points that employees in this research were saying, this is what I want my organization to do, here are the distilled 4 key points. I'll give you the full data shortly. The first thing is, literally 90% of people that have experienced remote working have said, I want to stick with this. I don't want to go back to the office full time. And even some are saying, I don't want to go back to the office at all. You can see some employers like that. Twitter's saying all their staff can work at home, and some don't. We're missing the innovation and the corridor conversations. So it's quite polarized. Secondly, employees are saying, I need more connection with my boss, my colleagues. In this new world of remote working, I'm starting now to miss the connection. You need to do more to support that communication. The third thing, employees are saying, give me more emotional support. Now that can be helped with mental health, or it can be helped with general well-being. There's been a surge and a spike in the last 8 months in use of Lumina emotion for coaches taking employees through things to do with their emotional well-being. And the fourth thing, employees are saying, give me practical and give me technical support. The practical support, be clear with me on my expectations now that I'm working in a remote environment. And the technical support, I think something like 10% of people in this survey of 4,400 were saying, I need a better laptop, I need help on how to make Zoom work, and so on and so on and so on, all to do with technology. A few hypotheses were tested in this research. The first one looked at a group of people who we assessed their mental health back in 2018, and then we reassessed the same people in the middle of the pandemic. And what we found was this questionnaire, which assesses your risk of a mental health issue, did show an increase in the risk, but that increase was not at a level that it was statistically significant to make a blanket statement that things have got worse. So that hypothesis was tested and rejected. Although there is evidence that things have got worse, it's not strong enough. We're going to get some more data there. Then we looked at some things where the hypotheses were supported. So we're finding people are being more vigilant and even underneath that, anxious. So anxiety and vigilance have definitely increased in this data set in the last 8 months. Sociability has gone down. People have got less opportunities in the UK right now to go to bars and restaurants. And we found that that behavior has decreased and reflection has increased. So it could be enforced, it could be the environment, but people are spending more time reflecting than they were, 8 months ago. And finally, we wanted to know, is it true that people who are higher in extroversion really like being in an office and don't want to work at home? And is it true that people who are more introverted are actually quite comfortable working at home? That was a hypothesis to test. I've seen it on the BBC and the press. Turns out it's not true. We've asked people about their preferences, personality-wise, as well as remote working, and it's not linked in that simple way. In fact, there's some evidence going the other way. Sometimes people who have introversion say, well, I'm quite introverted, but when I go into work in a boundaried way, that's where I get some of my outward-looking energy, and then I want to go back to being more introverted. So it's more complex than people may suggest. So a few facts for you. 11% of us across the globe have said we've got a mental health issue triggered during this crisis. That does vary somewhat by country. 9% of us, nearly 1 in 10, believe we've had COVID. That is higher than many governments will tell you. So there's a difference. Is it perception or are we under measuring? And 5%, 1 in 20 of us have lost a close family friend, member or friend due to COVID. The 11% sounds high. If you measure mental health narrowly, then maybe 2 or 3% of the people across the globe have a mental health issue in terms of schizophrenia, paranoia, and so on. If you define it broadly, including various forms of depression and also dementia, that can go up to 13, 14, you can even get it as high as 20%. So 11% is sort of in the middle of what we might have expected. In Payroll College in the UK found slightly less, 6% of people had had COVID at the same time. And the excess deaths, this is sort of consistent. If 1 in 20 of us are losing a friend or close family member to COVID, that's sort of consistent with the excess death rates. Now, here's the data on mental health. And you can see Australia, India, Hong Kong, people are more open to disclosing, I've had a mental health issue in this period. China and Albania at the bottom have had less issues, and it averages out around 11%. When we ask people about their productivity in this crisis, we find something interesting here, and let me explain this for you. This is the distribution of the 4,000 people, and you'll see that some people said, yeah, I'm much more productive. That's just about 10%. And another 20-30% said, yeah, I'm slightly more productive. Some were in the middle, and some said, no, I'm less productive. It turned out the people that said I'm more productive tended to be the people who didn't work at home before, and now they are, and they've had an uplift. And people who are feeling less productive are the ones who are in a work environment, and they've had to keep going in the work environment, but with COVID secure measures, and their productivity's gone down. So overall, it's sort of split. In terms of autonomy, we found that many more people are feeling in this period, despite the crisis, I have more autonomy in my life. So nearly 50% were saying, 45%, I think I've got more autonomy. And that also correlates with people who said, yeah, I'm really loving working remotely or working at home. Now I'm going to get you to give me your views here using the Zoom stamp feature. So if I could ask you to move your cursor over and find the Zoom menu, and then move over to annotate, and then go to where it says stamp, and maybe click on the star. So for me, I have been more anxious in the last 8 months. So I'm going to put a tick here. There have been concerns about business, concerns about health in my family. So put your stars on. The second row is about, have you been feeling disconnected from your colleagues? I would say slightly less, believe it or not, with all the Zoom. I've been talking to my team more than ever. Am I feeling isolated? Maybe a little bit with family and friends. Am I feeling excluded? I would say probably not. I'm as busy as ever and connected as ever. Am I feeling lonely? Maybe I'll tick it somewhere a little bit to the left. I'm missing the social interaction. So if we could all fill it in now across these 5 bars, and let's see how it compares to the research. It looks like all of us bar one are experiencing either the same or more anxiety. Disconnection seems fairly spread, isolation as well, exclusion, interesting. The research just suggests that people that normally work remotely and are used to working on Zoom are feeling actually more included, and loneliness is sort of spread. So thank you for that. I'll save it for good measure and move on and show you what the data, the 4,000 data points. So 43% of people, and this was very consistent across the globe, China, UK, US, and so on, felt more lonely. 39% of people across the globe are feeling more excluded. 62% more isolated. 56% are feeling somewhat disconnected. And 59% feeling more anxious. So it looks to me today that the anxiety in the group today is sort of similar, but some of these other things were more balanced than this research would have suggested. This breaks that data down, so bear with me on this. It's the same things on the vertical: loneliness, exclusion, isolation. The yellow bar are people who work remotely and in an office. The grey bar are the people like me. I didn't used to work remotely really, and now I do completely. The orange bar are some of my colleagues who are permanently remote. They were remote before and they're still remote. And the blue bar are those of us who do go into a workplace and we're still going in, whether that's on public transport and so on. And if we flick through here, the people least impacted by loneliness and exclusion are those that worked remotely before and are still doing so. In fact, those of us that worked remotely beforehand are feeling more included, because we used to be the extra person who was coming in on a dial-in on a phone in a face-to-face meeting, but now everyone's on Zoom. It's leveled the playing field. In terms of isolation, also people who already worked remotely, or indeed those that keep going in a workplace. If you've had less change, you're feeling less isolated. It's those of us that have had a shift in our work pattern. And disconnection is at its peak among people like myself. I didn't work remotely, now I do all the time. That has caused us to feel, on average, quite disconnected. Anxiety, on the other hand, is higher for those that need to go into work. Now, it turns out there's 2 sources of anxiety. One source is the economic impact. Am I going to lose my job, or will my income go down, and so on? And the second source is, may I get the disease, or may my family get the disease? I'm worried what that means. Those are the 2 sources. And if you're going back into a workplace, you've got a lot of anxiety around public transport and the safety of your environment. Those people who work at home are feeling slightly safer, and that isn't as big a source of anxiety. And in terms of autonomy and productivity, it is the people who are working at home that have had that autonomy lift through this crisis. Now, I know some of you on the call today may not have experienced Spark before, so have a look at these words. Find a word that's something that you've used in the last 8 months. So for me, I'm going to go for measured. I'm not normally measured, but with this extra space I've got working at home, I've been a little bit more serious-minded. So choose a word. I've color-coded them. The words that are color-coded the same tend to correlate. So measured goes with observing, goes with intimate, and so on. And we can statistically arrange all of these personality traits in a circular model. Extroversion on the right, outcome-focused, discipline, down-to-earth, introversion, people-y, and inspiration. And we can make it look nice in a model like so. Now, if I bring this to life, for those of you that have not experienced it before, what does this mean? It means in a crisis, different traits, different parts of our way of being will come to the surface when they're triggered. So for example, Those of us that have had to let go of control and go a bit with the flow in this crisis. In the UK, we never know what our government's going to tell us next. So we become more adaptable, a bit more flexible, and we go with the flow. Some of us have gone into big picture thinking in the crisis. So if you've responded by journaling and reflecting and re-envisaging and recreating your business, that's big picture thinking. Some of us have gone more extroverted. We've said, I want to go on a Zoom call every day. I'm going to connect with the family and do quizzes. That's an extroverted response. And some of us have gone outcome focused as a response. Okay, I need to grab hold of things, get to the point, and be more competitive and make sure we survive. Now, the opposite of inspiration is discipline. Some of us have had a response to the crisis to say, I need a plan to tackle this. And in fact, what I need to do is work harder throughout this crisis. And some of us have been down to earth, meaning actually I need to be cautious and sensible and reduce the risk. And some people like me have retreated into our introversion and become a bit more measured and reflective. And some of us have been people focused and said, can I take care of my neighbors? Have they got the food they need? How can I show empathy and collaborate? So this is the instrument that was used to measure in this crisis how people may have changed. This is in fact my partner, Deb. This is her personality before the crisis. She was naturally disciplined, liked order, be in control, quite outcome focused and candid and clear, and generally more extroverted than introverted. But it seems that during the crisis, her discipline driven went down and her inspiration driven, she needed to go with the flow and not control stuff, went up, and her big picture thinking went up as she thought and reflected more creatively about how she could change her role, for example. In fact, she has changed her role at work during this period. And in measuring it, there's three different bits to who we are. The underlying bit is slightly less likely to change. These are the preferences that are more ingrained, the things that we instinctively like. But some of our everyday behaviors, if we don't have the opportunity to express them, for example, there's less opportunity to be sociable, we might find our everyday behavior has changed. And the overextended is when we're triggered. So under the pressure of working, for me, in my home environment, with my family more closely all the time, there's more potential for arguments, there's more potential for being triggered emotionally. Now, this is my colleague, Nikita Mikhailov. This example is also used with his permission. And this is Nikita before the crisis started. He was balanced in his discipline and inspiration. So he liked order, but he wanted to go with the flow and break the rules. Mainly liked his order, not other people's. And he's stronger on the things on the right-hand side. Now, if I flick forward and we look at him during the crisis, you can see that his people focused has increased. So if I just go back again, that's before, that's during, that's before, that's during. Now have a look at the right-hand side, the three bars. There is an underlying, an everyday, and an overextended in terms of all of these qualities. And if we have a look at the one circled here, if we have a look at before, Nikita was not really naturally collaborative, much more competitive, and not really that empathetic, much more logical. But during the crisis, and he's explained this to me in our peer coaching relationship that we have, he has become more collaborative and more willing to trust other people and try to work with others, reaching out on Zoom all over the world. And in his coaching, he's become more empathetic and sometimes overextends and overdoes it and shows too much empathy. So our individual response to the COVID crisis is just as important as sort of average statistics. And there has been a sharp increase in the level of coaching activity of people in white collar environments we've experienced in the last 8 months. So I'm curious to know how has COVID affected you? How's it affected your work life? How has it affected your family? And you can see on the mandala here a question: which behaviors have helped you out in the last 8 months? So I suggested for me it was measured, was something that I dialed up. And okay, so what I'm going to do now is ask you to actually share here by using the stamp facility, which you think you've done more of. I'm going to give myself a stamp on measured, but which has come to your rescue in the last 8 months. And let's just see with that stamp feature what we have on the call here today. Okay, got a practical coming in, a structured, someone's flexible, Mark's intimate, empathy, another measured, joining me over there, sociable. A couple of people on imagination, seeing a little bit more on the top half of the mandala than the bottom at the moment. Cautious is being highlighted, keeping the risk down, following the government advice, staying safe. Yep. A few people are coming in with practical and reliable. A few people are accommodating others, showing empathy and concern. Only had 1 star in extroversion so far. That is a common experience. I've run this exercise a few times. Not many people are responding in an overly extroverted way. So I'm going to, that's prompted someone else to come in with it. So I'm going to save that. And now if we have a look at the next screen, this is being triggered. It could be that we get triggered in the same ways that we use the behaviors normally, or it could be that we do it differently. So we don't assume just because you're extroverted that you can become overbearing. We measure it separately. So have a go now and use the stamp again. What have you done? So I have at times become serious and withdrawn. At times I've become argumentative. Let's see where everyone on the call today has gone in terms of our overextended behaviors. Someone's joined me in the argumentative, a few people at the top. Quite a few of you, in fact, have become serious and withdrawn, and a few emotionally stretched. Interesting patterns. I'm curious as to how many of the people here are working remotely, getting lost in details. That can happen. Yep. A few people have lost their focus without the challenge of working with other people. A little bit detached and aloof. Yeah, interesting. It seems to be more the left side of the mandala as well. So thank you for sharing that. If I move us on now and we have a look at what the data says, this is an attempt to show the spread of the 4,400 people globally. And we looked at their introversion, in particular their reflection. And the line here represents where the 4,400 people sit. So nobody said that they'd had a collapse of their introversion. Most people said their reflection had gone up 36%. There was a couple of people that almost doubled their use of introversion and reflection, and a few people went down, but most people it went up. That's interesting. In terms of risk reacting, which means scanning for risks, being vigilant, wanting to minimize risks, there's been a 28% increase. You can see the bulk of the data is to the right here. Most people have become more risk averse. Some people have gone almost doubled their risk aversion, but there are a few crazies. So I'm going to suggest, people that say, we don't need a mask, I need my freedom, or whatever. I'm just going to go out and do my thing. Their approach to risk has probably been triggered, maybe polarized by not liking other people's attitude. They've gone down, and their approach to risk, they're taking more risk. They're becoming less vigilant. If we have a look at what's gone down overall, inspiration-driven spontaneity. There's less opportunity for being spontaneity. Spontaneity can be dangerous right now. And on average, that's gone down 20% over this period. There are a few people that have had a total spontaneity collapse, like it's been removed from their life. But there are some people that are increasing it and to hell with it, and that's what they're doing. And our sociability's gone down. So you can see on average 44%, a few people have had a sociability collapse. There are some people here. So my son, Joshua, who's 17 years old, his sociability is up. He's quite happy not needing to go to school. He communicates socially with his friends on social media. And he's just got a car recently. He likes driving his car around, and his sociability is up. So there's a spread, but the bulk, it's gone down. Let's take a look now at should the lockdown have happened sooner. Again, it's the similar sort of spread. So if you look at the UK, a pretty high percentage of us thought, something like 40%, no, it definitely should have happened sooner. And most of us thought, well, yeah, probably should have happened sooner. Only a small minority thought it was okay. The people that thought it happened on time, Czech Republic, South Africa, New Zealand, although for the second wave, that may be changing, certainly in Czech Republic, possibly not New Zealand. And we are extending this research for those of you that would like to have a go at doing it and look at the second wave. Are we coming out of it too soon, or did we come out of it too soon? People in Mexico, where there's a high death rate, they certainly think so, as does Albania, Indonesia. The US, on balance, most people think they came out of it too soon, if they ever properly indeed went into it, and so on. And the countries that got good feedback that said, no, we didn't come out too soon, New Zealand with very low death rates. China has very low death rates as well, given the vast size of the country, as does Latvia and Taiwan. Have we prioritized the economy too much and ignored the health issues? Well, that's certainly what they think in Albania, and also in Brazil and Madagascar, where the testing is very poor, and in the United States, where not everyone thinks that, but on balance, people think the economy's been prioritized too highly. And the countries that came out well again, New Zealand, France, Germany, Netherlands, South Africa, and so on. Have we handled it well overall? The country that comes out top of the list is New Zealand, followed by Taiwan, China, Latvia, Germany, Canada, Australia, all countries that had a cautious approach and have had much lower death rates. And who's not handled it so well? Madagascar, the US, Brazil, much higher death rates. Hong Kong actually has lower death rates, but concern over the impact on democracy and elections causes people to be unhappy with how it's been handled. So I'm going to share with you some more data, and then I'm going to ask you to consider what it might mean for you and your profession. So what's happened to our income? Well, a lucky 7% of us, our income has gone up. Most of us, nearly half, our income's about the same, but 26%, a quarter, it's gone down. And 1 in 5 of us have had a huge decrease in our income. And we know that when the income goes down in that way, particularly a sudden shock, the impact on our well-being and the risk to mental health goes up. Are we working harder? Well, actually, it turns out 1 in 5 of us are working less hours. This turns out to people who are furloughed, laid off, or had to go part-time. About a third of us are working about the same, but the group of us that weren't working remotely and are now working remotely, we're actually working longer hours. So the traditional fear of a traditional boss is, if everyone works at home, I can't see them, so maybe they won't be working so hard. It turns out people are, on the whole, working harder. And you may be fascinated to know this is moderated by a personality variable. So those of you who are discipline driven, you're ordered, you like a plan, you've tended to work even harder when you work at home. And people like me who are inspiration driven, well, we're generally working harder, but we get distracted because something's on the telly or we see something outside and so on. So there is a moderating factor down to personality. Now I'm going to ask for your views again about when we're done, because there are 2 vaccines coming. Let's say the vaccines work. Let's go a year into the future. I want you to imagine you can go back to socializing and working in the office. Do you want to do it? So again, I want you to use the stamp feature. And if you don't want to work remotely at all, stamp anywhere in here. If you want to work remotely some of the time, maybe you're happy working remotely 1 or 2 days a week here. If you want to be remote most of the time, maybe 3-4 days a week remote, just go into the office for occasional team meetings. And if you want to remotely all the time, like you're done, the office is dead, close the office, tick down the bottom, and let's see what we're getting. So thank you, Chevy. She's in the second category, wanting to work remotely some of the time. We're getting a bit of a balance between these 2 options. There's 3 of us that want to work remotely all the time. 1 of us says, get me back to the office. My partner, Deb, she can't wait to get back to the office. The intensity of working at home and the lack of sociability with other people doesn't suit her. My son Joshua could happily never go to school ever again. He could be happily doing his studies remotely. So thank you for that. And this is the data from the survey. So 4,400 people, and this is consistent across the globe. 10% said, I'm done, I don't want to work remotely. Half of us say, actually, I want to work remotely just some of the time, 1 or 2 days a week, please. 30%, almost a third, actually, no, most of the time. 12% said, a bit like Twitter, I'm done, we're going to close the office, and so on. This has a huge impact. It remains to be seen whether people will still like remote working in another year. There is some suggestion of some fatigue getting in around it when new people come on board. You can't connect with them as quickly and so on, but we will see. Now, this is not, there's other research been done. It's not a new concept. So just to share 2 studies that are at the extremes. One study said, actually, working at home, bad news. You get lonely, irritable, you worry, you get guilty, don't do it. Another study said if it's done well, actually well-being goes up. And the truth is, it depends how well it's implemented. It depends on the technology and so on. And to an extent, our individual differences. So I have a few more bits of data to share with you, and then I'm going to take some questions. Let me just have a look if anything's popped up in the chat along the way. I can't see any chat questions yet, but if you do have any questions or comments, please do put them in the chat box, and I'll look to answer them as we go. So what challenges have you faced since working remotely? The biggest one, 20% of people in this big survey globally said, I'm really missing the connection with colleagues. And nearly 20% said work and private life, it's hard to separate it. And some of us said, 15% or more, my workplace at home, sharing a kitchen with other people is not good. And I get a bit distracted by the dog and the family or whatever, and I'm struggling to balance. And just around 10% of us said, actually, the equipment my employer has provided is not suitable. The laptop's not good for Zoom, or I'm missing a camera, or the Wi-Fi is not so good at home, and so on. So that's interesting data. Now this is fascinating. So everybody that did this research answered 12 questions that are at industry standard scale that measure your risk of having a mental health issue. And what we found was the people at most risk of a mental health issue were this category here that also said, I'm now working at home, I wasn't before, but I'm unclear on the expectations from my boss and the organization. They've sent me home, there's a bit of chaos. Their risk of a mental health issue was dramatically higher than the bottom group, which is people who are saying, yeah, it's been handled well, and the expectations upon me from the organization and my boss are crystal clear. So one learning point for employers is, it's really important here, we communicate well around roles and expectations to mitigate this impact on mental health. Why do we want to work remotely? It turns out the biggest reason is the top one. Over 40% of people said, I don't want to commute anymore. And this is in China, it's in Europe, it's in Mexico. No one wants to recruit. And what do they, sorry, to commute. And what do they want to do? They want more work-life balance. And if I jump down here, saving money, they don't want the cost of recruiting. They want to be more green and not pollute. They want more time to spend with their friends and family by saving the commuting. And like me, they want to sleep more. If I can save time commuting and sleep, that's a good thing. There were 2 other things at the top here, position 2 and 3. I want to work remotely, in fact, sorry, 3 and 4, because it gives me more autonomy and it makes me more productive. So those were the other reasons that people gave. I quite like, I feel empowered by this situation. If we have a look at why we don't want to work remotely, some of us say, I'm just, and the scale here is lower, by the way, so this is 7%, but some people are saying, I'm just not so well connected to my colleagues. My working environment space is not so good. Some people say, actually, I'm more productive if I go into the office, and so on. So there's reasons the other way. And the final piece I wanted to share here in terms of the bar charts, what did employees say that they want from employers? The biggest thing is, please help me figure out how to work well remotely. Half of the people said, I need help with this. I need better ways to manage the stress that I'm incurring in this crisis. Please help me. I need help on balancing stuff, and I need to know more about safety. And coming in at number 5, can you give me more emotional support? And that's why we've been doing more coaching with our emotional intelligence offering during this period. And number 6 was where the technical support comes in. So I want better technical support for working virtually. That was about 1 in 3 people were looking for that from their organization. So pretty interesting findings.
Hi, Stuart. We have a question. Sorry to cut you off. We have a question from Brian McRae on the chat box, saying if you have done any analysis on how this data is affected by job type, for example, finance via sales.
What a great question. And hi, Brian. Great to have you on the call. So we haven't. Would we be able to do that? We may be able to. So this is a first cut of the data, and there were some of the people did share information with us on their job role, not all of them, a subset. So that is interesting. Are you wondering, Brian, whether salespeople might be less impacted if they're used to working on the phone and working virtually, or were you thinking the reverse? Hey, maybe Brian, you want to unmute and comment on that. You're welcome to do so. What were you thinking? What was your hypothesis? If Brian's able to unmute, he might not be able to.
Hi, Stuart. Hello, everybody.
Hi there.
I'm not sure I do have a hypothesis, but I would expect to see some variation amongst job role types, if for no other reason that different personalities tend to be attracted to different job roles. From the work I've been doing with salespeople and sales managers, those who were, for example, already working primarily on the phone, the transition for them working remotely was not very great.
Yeah.
For their managers,
for those that were the salespeople who were sort of traveling around a lot, I'm guessing you're going to say it's been a more traumatic shift for them.
Indeed, yes. And also, I think my experience is sales managers are finding it harder to cope with the new way of working than the
tell me about that. I'm intrigued by that. Yeah.
It depends a lot on management style, but within many organizations, it's still the case that the traditional manager wants to see his people in operation. Unfortunately, in sales, performance management, well, people think they're doing performance management, and all they're really doing is activity management. And for those people,
monitoring their toilet breaks rather than their performance.
Exactly, and you see organisations where people are wanting to put in software to monitor what people are doing at their laptops and how often they're going to Facebook and all these sorts of things.
Yes.
So
what I would add to that then is that there is some evidence in this research that if your management style is one where you're quite extroverted and maybe a more traditional approach to management where you walk around the office, talk to people, and you're used to a sort of command and control for having dialogue and persuading people and so on, you are more disorientated in this new world where everyone's gone remote because suddenly you can't do that anymore. You're trying to find the virtual equivalent and do Zoom calls every morning with everybody, but it's harder. And the managers who seem to be doing better are the ones that are maybe slightly more planned and organized in their interactions with their team and don't do so much of that more extroverted walking around. So I think if this continues, it will change how we develop managers and leaders. There's different skills required, I think, when working remotely. I don't know, would you agree with that, Brian? I mean, is that?
Yes, I would. And I think we'll find it may be the case that some managers who were successful in the old world, how things used to be, aren't so successful unless they change how they operate in the new world.
And of course, we knew in the new world, the thing that you have to do more is you have to trust. You have to trust that your staff will be working and that they're not sloping off. And but ironically, if staff feel that you don't trust them, it will create the very behaviors that you don't want.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting. We've been working on a project. It's really for a government quango, where we've been doing a management development program, and the whole idea from the sponsor was to enable people to take more responsibility for their own development. So a series of what were going to be face-to-face sessions became webinars. And they're all about self-enablement, really. But the sponsor left the organization. We're now at the end of the 12-month project, and the person who's inherited it wants attendance registers and results of the quizzes that people did.
Sort of classic low trust, trying to get back control again. Probably not the best.
Indeed. Yeah. So
thank you for sharing that. And the approach you've just suggested there maybe suggests not an optimistic view of their staff, but being more responsive attendance records. So what you can see on the screen here are different responses to stresses and stimuli in the environment. So if we respond in a confident way, we're optimistic, we're resilient, even-tempered, we call it reward reacting. If our response to pressure is to be vigilant, look for risks and minimize them, be quite responsive, impassioned to our emotions, come into it, that's the bottom half of this mandala. And this is more towards reward, and it's been linked to dopamine in research and brain plasticity theory. And moving away from threat has been linked to serotonin and a theory around brain stability. Now, to an extent, these things are personality qualities that we would find hard to change, but they are also, to a degree, trainable in terms of our behavior. And this is some research in China coming out of the crisis, when everybody that had been off was returning to work. They looked at mental health, and they found that of the two sources of potential risk to your mental health, anxiety of the disease and the risk of unemployment or economic disruption, it was the unemployment that was the bigger driver in this particular survey. And the antidote was to help people be more resilient and optimistic. And if we go back here, you can in fact see that resilience and optimism are things on the top half here. And they are also very trainable. Many of the things that we do in organizations can help staff have a more optimistic mindset and be more resilient. Not necessarily easy, but it is trainable. So if I'm to draw this to a close and maybe open it up for some more questions, the context has changed. Our thinking is unfortunately across the globe less positive than it was. We are feeling collectively more anxious, more lonely. Our behavior has changed. We're less sociable, and our response to stress has changed. We may be even getting anxious about not taking risks and so on. Is it permanent? Of course, we don't really know. It could be we've been triggered into these behaviors now, and they may reverse. We will test that and see. And we've checked out some hypotheses. And the big one I would highlight is don't jump to conclusions at the bottom here around extroverts liking remote working. It's more complex than that, as Brian was sort of suggesting, actually. And of course, we've seen more vigilance, more anxiety, less sociability, more reflection. And remote working is definitely here to stay. Employers need to help staff be more connected. Staff do need more emotional support, coaching support, and so on. And they also need practical and technical support. So I've protected a bit of a space now for the last 5-10 minutes to see what questions you may have, and also to ask you, how do you think this research could be useful to you? How could it serve your organizations, or if you're outside an organization, your clients? So I'm curious to gather some of your views here. So you can click on annotate again, but this time you can click on the text button, and I'll do it here and go to the top and say more research on the second wave. Yeah, for example, I've just typed in at the top. So I'm going to encourage you now to put some of your perspectives in here, and let's just see what we can create in the next few minutes. And then we'll hear from anybody that might have a question or a comment on what we're doing here. So what do we what do we have? Yeah. So it's just find the annotate button and click on the text, pop something in. I can see Adita's about to type something. Yeah. Okay, so Jill, thank you, Jill, and hi to Jill. confirmed client feeling that shifting to permanent remote work is common. So you're saying Jill, that is your experience. You are getting the sense from your clients over in the US that remote working is going to be here to stay. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, I have one large client in particular who says we think this is what we're going to do permanently, but we're not sure that that's not just us. We want to know that other people are feeling this as well.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because as I say, you know, the Twitter are saying let's all go work remotely if you wish, but some organizations are saying actually it impacts our innovation and we want to get back to the office. And I'm grappling with that as Lumina because we're a very innovative company and we benefit from the interaction cross-functionally all being in one office. Yet at the same time, I've surveyed my staff and my staff would actually like to work remotely most of the time. So we're contemplating downsizing our office so we can come to the office for meetings and creative sessions, but actually work more at home. But I have to wonder, is that a permanent switch? I wonder if it's a permanent switch or if we might get a bit tired of working remotely. I'm certainly getting tired of working remotely, even though I have been enjoying it. Yeah.
I did a workshop with the same company who's struggling with this decision, and we did it in person. They chose to do it in person, and it was the first time that they had come together in person since COVID started. And it was a very good experience for them, and they kind of decided if they do make the shift to working remotely permanently, they would have regularly scheduled in-person times as well.
And I think that's going to be part of it going forward. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Jill. So take regular pulse surveys to track whether the positive impact reduces over time. Yeah, that's a really good thing to do. Thank you for that, Anne. Study the correlations between the lockdowns and mental health reported levels. We will get more data on that. So absolutely a good idea. Open clouds for further discussion and work. Yeah. Don't make assumptions about how people are feeling and what they need. Yeah, check it out. Thank you, Anne. Analyze the difference between the lockdown in the summer months and winter. Yeah, so if you want to help us with the research going through the winter, I'm going to give you a link in a moment. You can click to support this research. Some people have come forward and said, yeah, no, I've got an organization I work with. I could get 50 people in my department to fill it in. And then we can put out the results and see how your department correlates with this global norm. So if that appeals to anyone, you can reach out on LinkedIn or ping me a message and I'll look to set that up for you and we can check out the response in the winter. So use the data as a springboard to survey your employees' population about their needs. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think
we have a few comments also on the chat box, Stuart.
Okay, let me have a look. What do we have on the chat box? Let's have a look. Okay, so a few thank yous, which is nice. Oh, you can't annotate on your phone. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Zoom doesn't work perfectly and everything. Yeah. A couple of comments there, Brenda. It's all about trust. I do agree with you. It throws up huge issues of trust when we move to remote working, but that's underpins good leadership. And a request to look at the blue collar workforce. Yeah, I would like to do some further research going into blue collar environment. We had to choose one initially. We went white collar, but I think the biggest impact on blue collar, if you are still working in your role, is the increased anxiety over concern around the disease. That's something that blue collar faces worse than white collar. Yeah. Very good. Any data cuts around gender? Actually, that's an analysis that's still outstanding. So that will be coming. We do have gender, and we will be looking at that. Yeah, we will be looking at that. Yeah. So okay, so thank you for that. I'm going to finally share with you the screen here that says this is the research link. We'll send some of these slides out afterwards as well, but if you click it, you can support us with the research. For those of you who like reference, we've got some references. Yeah. And if you haven't experienced Spark before and you'd like to, you can do the research, but if you want to go straight for it, there's a link here as well. and I'd be delighted to connect you with whoever the relevant person at Lumina is to take you through your portrait. So that's the freebie one, and this is the research. So are there any other questions that anybody may have before we close the webinar today? I'll stop sharing the screen, and if we wish, we can turn our cameras on so we can say hello or goodbye. You're welcome to do so.
Stuart, just a quick one from me. I'm very interested to hear whether you've got any insights into how decision-making processes might have changed during COVID.
Okay, so what were you thinking? Did you have any experience yourself around what's happening?
So, you know, around leadership direction, around how people have been able to respond quickly to make decisions about the well-being of their workforce, whether organizations have thought about people or just thought about the organization and carrying on business as usual without considering
their people. Yeah, interesting. In truth, this research went a bit more bottom up. We were looking at the individual's experience of the crisis and what the leaders did. We haven't explicitly surveyed the leaders as to how it's impacted their decision making, and that is a really interesting thing. I was sort of hoping this data would inform the leaders to have a more enlightened approach, maybe.
Yeah, hopefully it will. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Anne. Great question. Is there anything anybody else wishes to say before we complete today? Any final question, request, or shall I draw it to a close? So I think I will draw it to a close. So I'm going to say thank you to everybody from all over the world for spending the time to listen, to engage and to share. I'm hoping we've all found it useful and helpful. We will send the slides out afterwards to those of you that are interested. And if you want to support the research further, please do ping me, including if you've got a subset of people that want to do it, to compare them. That can be a good idea too. So thank you so much. And I'll do the statutory Zoom waving goodbye at the end. We wave goodbye.